a bad system will beat a good person any day. And so a lack of a system, a lack of a way for a person to succeed, the person's going to fail. They can't help but fail. The workforce used to be more stable. You had people who came into a business and they stayed there till they retired. Now you've got 3 to 5 years, if that, of people staying there. So if you're training people and they're moving on, and there is not a process to make that standard, to capture that knowledge, then that's just going out the door. And a lot of the manufacturing companies I've been in are really struggling because the why they do their thing, whatever it is, has been lost.
Welcome to KPI Fireside. Our mission is simple: to improve companies and to improve careers through continuous improvement. In every episode, we explore the spark, the moment, the mindset, or the method that ignites real change. Whether you're just starting out or leveling up, you'll find the insights and inspiration to fuel your next improvement. Welcome back to KPI Fireside, a continuous improvement podcast. I am your host, Keith Norris. Our guest today is Matt Yearsley. Matt is the founder at Operational Excellence Advisors. He has more than 25 years of experience in manufacturing, engineering, and operations leadership. Matt helps organizations improve performance by developing people, strengthening systems, and building cultures of continuous improvement. He helps leaders move beyond firefighting and create sustainable, repeatable processes that drive long-term success. Matt is someone who really enjoys what he does and is passionate about building great organizations through developing great people. Matt, we're super excited to have you here on the podcast today. Welcome.
Well, thanks, Keith. It's great to be here with you today.
Yeah, wonderful. In some of our prior chats, I know I had asked this question a little bit, and you had a quite an interesting answer. So I wanted to ask you again a little bit about your introduction to continuous improvement. How did you get your start on this path as a career?
Okay. I started my career in manufacturing, and as part of my manufacturing world, right, there was an idea that continuous improvement wouldn't work in certain situations, certain kinds of manufacturing. And so I took that as a personal challenge to go out and try to understand how I could use continuous improvement in like a continuous flow type process, something that was exciting for me to learn. I went out and researched and found that it wasn't necessarily the process, but the people that made up the difference in the continuous improvement world, and started to recognize that any process, if you have the right people involved, could definitely bring in continuous improvement into their culture and make that part of the way they did business. The thing that really shoved me into where I am now was when I became an operations manager, a production manager, facility, and started to recognize that as a leader to these people, I was now responsible, I guess, to hold them accountable for what they were doing, but also providing them what they needed to succeed. One situation specifically, I had a supervisor who came in and kind of pounded his fist on the table and said, "Hey, I need you to hold this shift accountable." And man, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, how do I do that? What does that even mean? The reaction he wanted was for me to jump up, run out, and yell at somebody. And put a lot of thought into that. And so, by helping these people succeed in doing their job, what standard am I holding them accountable to? Have I given them the ability to go change and improve their work environment and what they do? And how much of that do I own and how much of that do they own? And it really kicked me into the world that I'm in now and my love for continuous improvement.
That's such a great story. And I think that's probably one of the milestones in a lot of people's journey when this word accountability, I chuckle a little bit when I hear it because it's so popular in just in out there on social media and individual conversations. Hold them accountable. And I think you're right. Like a lot of people feel like it means choose somebody out, go yell at somebody. But have you ever seen a situation where that really did a lot of good?
No, I actually haven't. I've seen it spur 3 responses. One is they just fire back at you, right? It just an aggression response right away. 2, they start looking for their exit. They find some way to get out, right? The third is to just build this victim or barrier between you and them to where they just don't trust you anymore. And they may keep working, but their desire to work with you diminished quite a bit, right?
So how did you personally go from hold them accountable. It sounds like that was like a directive given to you. Like you need to hold them accountable to figuring out, where you had to maybe get really specific about what the expectations were.
Yeah, absolutely. I wrestled with this a lot. This supervisor came in, he was frustrated. But oddly enough, a couple days later, another supervisor came in and wanted me to hold that exact same person accountable who had come in my office earlier. So now I've got two people telling me that I need to hold both of them accountable. And I'd go home at night like, man, how do I do this? What's this mean to me? What is my version of accountability? How am I defining it? I brought in both of these supervisors and I sat them down and I said, listen, you both want me to hold each other accountable based on your perceptions, your opinions. So I'll tell you what, if you can go out and find me the standard that exists, documented, and I know that you've both read it and seen it, then I will hold you accountable to that standard. If you can't find that standard, then I have nothing to hold you accountable to. It's your opinion versus my opinion versus his opinion. And so they took off. They went out and they searched and searched, and they never did find the standard. And it turned out it was opinion based. And so working together, we came up with we called it our issue investigation, a very simple little form. And we asked 3 questions. We said, do you have all the tools you need to succeed, all the tools and resources? 2, do you have the knowledge of what you were supposed to do? And a 3rd, is this knowledge backed up by something that's tangible? So the fact that you may think you know something, is there a standard that supports that knowledge? And if any one of those was no, if they couldn't say they had if I couldn't say that they had the resources and the tools to do their job, if I couldn't say that there was a standard out there and that they'd been taught that standard, then that fell on me as a leader. That was my ownership. And I needed to go improve their workplace, their work environment to help them succeed. If the answer to those were yes, they had all the resources they need, they had the tools they need, they knew what they were supposed to do, there was a standard that supported it, and they just chose to work with outside the system. Now it became a different discussion, right? They just chose to not do the right thing. And that's really how we solved it. And sometimes following this process led to having to let someone go because they chose to work outside of the system. Multiple times, however, I've had people who I have had let go come up to me afterward and said, I really appreciate it. It was terrible losing my job. I never want to do that again. But I appreciate that the system was fair, that you did what you could to help me succeed, and I chose not to work within that system. And that you took responsibility for what was yours, and I needed to take responsibility for what was mine. So didn't want to lose my job, but I recognized that it was my fault. Right. And the process became the bad guy.
I think that's a great insight when if the system that you're working in is so clear and you make a decision or choose not to follow it, then it's like, okay, you're empowered. You've made the decision yourself in that scenario. I want to drill down on, you said to those 2 folks, like, hey, see if you can go find the standard. And you said that they didn't come back with one. I'm assuming that maybe, since then you've had this kind of similar situation and you were able to say, go find me the standard. And they did come back with it. When they find that standard, what does that look like? What is the form of that?
It can come in a lot of forms, right? It can be a written SOP. It can be a decision tree, a flow map, something that outlines what behavior is expected in a given circumstance. In the world of manufacturing, it can be control plan, right? I walk in the morning and I start my day by turning these sets of machines on and setting these parameters and moving through my process, ensuring that everything's set properly, right? Or it can be a cleaning checklist, make sure these things got touched and cleaned and fixed, and a million different kinds of forms, but something that is set up as the company standard, saying we as the owners of the company, managers of this company, have accepted this as the way we do business right now. Doesn't mean it can't be improved, but that's the standard. That's the thing we're doing today.
I love that. I love the idea of a standard. This makes me think about another concept that sometimes comes up when people start thinking about continuous improvement, and it's this idea that is continuous improvement really continuous? Is it this kind of smooth diagonal line where everything's always getting a little bit better? Or is it more like a set of stairs, right? Where if you have a standard, things are the same for a little bit and then they need to jump up. So how do you advise somebody reconciles this concept of continuous improvement being always improving versus working against a standard?
It's a good question, and I get asked that a lot. I've seen it from a couple different perspectives. One is we're changing so fast we can't build a standard, or our business is so fast moving that this will just slow us down if we have a standard. Or the other side, right? Especially highly regulated industries, or we have to have a standard. We'll build it. We won't use it, but it'll be there so that when an auditor or someone shows up, then we can do something about it. One of the things I've seen that was successful though is that the standards a lot of times are built, right? People will build books of SOPs and procedures, and they sit on the shelf until somebody gets passionate about it again, and they come back and build another full set of rework it all. Built into that has to be a tool for improving it consistently. So a lot of the clients I work with, I say, one of the first things that we've got to implement is a one-on-one with you and your people and throughout the organization. And as part of that one-on-one discussion, you're talking about the typical one-on-one things, but I want you to grab one of those procedures, just one of them, and I want you to bring it out and review it with that person in the room. And not review it as a, hey, you're doing something wrong, but review it as, does this still work for us? Is this something that we really want to continue doing? Are we missing something? Can we improve this in any way to make your life better? And just have that fresh cycle of going through and reviewing these things so they stay up to date on, and they stay relevant. It becomes part of their knowledge, part of their behavior. It's not a trainee event, right? It's not some blitz to try to pound all this stuff into their heads. It's a continued review of what's happening. And then added on to that, if you find a big gap or a big opportunity, let's turn it into some kind of continuous improvement event, whether it be a Kaizen or something else, root cause event, where we can really dig in and try to understand either why the standard is not right or what we can do to make it better if we find it's a big waste of time.
You just mentioned one-on-ones is a place that it sounds like you've recommended starting with, is having a one-on-one. Again, assuming that a standard can evolve over time, is there a standard set of steps that you would recommend for somebody who hasn't done one-on-ones before, and you're like, hey, look, it's going to evolve a little bit, but start with this outline for your one-on-ones? Do you have like a template or a couple of questions that you could share as start here if you're not doing one-on-ones?
I've worked with several places who tell me they want A players. I want to go hire a bunch of A players to be on my team, right? And in their mind, they have this vision of some professional sports team or a military group, right? And that's what they see, this drive, this discipline, and everything that goes along with it. Part of what I do for fun is I run a youth wrestling club, youth wrestling program. So that's my evening job.
Nice.
But these athletes, these military personnel live in an extremely structured world where the basketball player has a set of plays, right? They have their role in there, and it is very well defined. The coach lays it out for them. And they know that if a play is called, they have to do these certain things for that play to be successful. In the military, right, it's very proceduralized. They know what the reporting structure is. They know who they report to. And they know what to report and when and how. And every task they do has been very, very well documented. And so in our minds, as leaders in these organizations, they come out and say, I want an A player. And they imagine these elite athletes, but forget play call part of it, right? And so they'll go out and find somebody who's super aggressive or has been to one of those environments that's very structured like that and succeeded, and then plug them into kind of a random chaotic environment and find that they struggle. They really have a hard time adapting because now there is no rules. They're expecting this person, this A player, to make the rules because they're an A player, not thinking about all of the structure that was built into their success previously. And so, long story to say, as I'm asking people to move into a one-on-one, I want to know what things will help them succeed in the role that they have. What kind of structure, what kind of direction do you need? And what kind of things are they comfortable inventing? Yeah. And so for topics, would come in at one, relationships are a big thing to me. So, hey, let's get closer in a relationship world, make sure that your family's well, make sure that you're well, and things in your life are okay. Second, your visions, I guess, of what you want to see in this organization. Where do you see yourself fit? Where do you see yourself in the future? And if we can build a plan around it, let's build a plan around it. And then we jump into the numbers, right? The things that you're accountable for that day. How's your team doing? How is your sales going? How are your different projects progressing? And then finish it with, okay, these are the expectations we've set through different processes and procedures we have in the organization. Let's review one of them and decide if we need to go do something to improve it.
Sounds like a very good structure there. Are there any like specific questions that you found you really like on a one-on-one within any of those topics that you just mentioned?
I don't know if there's a specific question, but there is a specific challenge. I guess I'll put it that way. One of my challenges that I like to make in a one-on-one is let's find a problem and solve it. Not put a band-aid on it. Let's go find a problem. So I want you to go find one thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be the biggest squeaky wheel, just one thing that you know that it annoys you, annoys your people, and it's really making it hard to do your job. And then I want you to go out and I want you to evaluate. I really want you to dig into it, try to understand what the real problem is. I want you to interview people. I want you to talk to people. I want you to get involved. And then I want to come back, want you to have you come back with what the current state of your problem is. And let's start figuring out how to solve that thing for you. And instead of me taking it on and saying, hey, I want to go, yep, I want to take care of this. I want you to go figure it out and not come up with solutions, just come back with understanding. And then we can work through the solution. We can work more into the real root cause kind of problem solving, but give them the ownership to do it, right?
Yeah, I really like that. So you're saying find something that you can fix or we can fix, I suppose, if that's applicable. I know sometimes with things like standard work, the criticism of stuff like this is that people sometimes will say, it's not great if you just do the things, you use the tools, but you don't get the result. And I liked your question there because you could almost apply that from like the manager's job in that one-on-one. Like, sure, you asked the questions, you did the one-on-one, but the job to be done was find something and have a plan to fix it. So I like that that's really a kind of a value add step for something that could be argued as, is this value add activity?
Well, it helps turn the conversation from a complaint fest, right? Where they're just
Yeah.
going to come in and open up and say, this is awful. And it works in group settings too, where
Yeah.
you've got a group that comes in and they just want to complain about how awful stuff is. And the reason they want to complain is because they want to pass that load on to somebody else who's going to go fix the problems for them, or they hope does, right? Instead, if you turn it a little bit and say, man, that's awful. This is a hard thing to do. I'm going to empower you to go out and understand it, teach me about it, and then let's figure out how to remove this thing from your world. And with a group, it changes it, right? Because now they're complaining about it and the ownership just shifted and they've got to go now try to figure it out and come back with the next steps in the process.
Yeah, this is a really juicy topic here because I think every manager, I don't know if every manager does one-on-ones. I know that there's a cohort of people that would say, don't bother with it, right? It's just like anything. But I think that it's a very relevant topic to anybody who's in any sort of supervisory role at all. I'm thinking about some of the challenges that somebody might have with a one-on-one. And when you start asking people for problems, one of the things that can come up is like, well, yeah, the problem's over there and the problem's over there. And, they start pointing fingers. Do you have any either maybe stories or tips and tricks on how somebody might do that either in a one-on-one environment or even in a group environment? It could probably get a little bit more volatile in a group environment than in a one-on-one, I would assume. Any advice for us there?
Now with lean, there's always go to the source, go to the problem, go on the floor, right? The Gemba walk. That's critical in any of this. Trying to solve any kind of problem in an office or in a conference room where nobody's going out and trying to understand the big picture, it just doesn't work. And so as you're bringing these things up, you're right. It's a very narrow focus. It's usually a symptom that's being delivered, right? Tainted with bias. And until you get somebody to see the full picture and understand other people's perceptions, other people's involvement in it, then that becomes the thing. And back to the accountability. If I jumped up and I reacted to every symptom that somebody brought to me that was shaded with their bias, then I would make a lot of very, very poor choices. And this probably sounds a little harsh, but I had somebody tell me one time, a mentor, he says, you've got to think that everybody's lying to you the first time. I'm like, that sounds terrible. I don't want it. I trust people. Why would I want to think that they're lying to me? He said, well, because they don't have the full story. He said, don't think that they're trying to deceive you. Think that they just don't have the full picture. And the story they're telling you is so based on their bias and their personal experience that it can't be the truth. And approach it with that kind of mentality to where now we want to go discover what a bigger, larger truth is to this issue, whatever it is we're dealing with. And so kind of framing it up and putting it out there and helping people recognize that this is a symptom and that there is a bias that's affected the way you see this symptom starts breaking those walls down a little bit to where they're willing to question and go look and try to gain a deeper understanding.
Could you drill down on that like symptom and bias concept with like maybe an example?
Okay, simple one. If I told my kids to go clean their room Yes, I would like the room clean. They disappear. They come back up 20 minutes later and say, hey, the room's clean.
Like 5 minutes though, right? Like 3
Yeah,
minutes later?
probably more like that. They come up and say the room's clean. And I walk down, and what do I see? I don't see them much changed. They, however, have moved a couple pieces of things around or shoved something under their bed and they cleaned. But my expectations and their expectations are very different, right? The image I have in my head. So their bias is based on their expectations, the vision they built, the story they told themselves that led to their actions. It didn't match mine, but it was, however, still the story they built around what I told them. And so getting into bringing these visions in unity, right? Making it clear that both of us see the exact same picture and have the same understanding. The same thing happens in business all the time. One of my first jobs, I was paired with a supervisor who was supposed to be my trainer. And the idea was that I was going to follow him around and do the work he did for a month to try to understand how to do my job. And I showed up day one, he hands me a radio and he says, I don't want you following me. Go figure it out. Right. And just left. And all this training that was supposed to be.
He empowered you?
He did empower me. Yeah, probably way too much. But he turned me loose. So instead of gaining knowledge, I had to go out and try to figure things out by myself. And while I was doing that, I was coming up with my own conclusions about things that I knew nothing about. So my bias was becoming set based on the things I was seeing and the experiences that I was feeling. And so as I walked by a piece of equipment or talked to a person and heard a sound, saw something I didn't understand or heard their complaint, that all of a sudden became, their symptom, that thing I heard, I had to try to create a meaning for it. And so when I created my meaning, I took that symptom now and turned it into what I thought was a problem without having the knowledge to really dig down. And based on the experience I've had, right, that would be the thing that helped me structure that problem and try to understand what it was poorly, very poorly. And so sitting down with somebody who's had the same experience, right? They're working, they work within their area, they hear something, they see something, and all of a sudden that thing gets defined as a problem without digging into the fact that it's just a symptom of something that's probably much worse or something that we need to solve more globally.
I really like this thread of standards. You use this example of some organizations have written out standards at some point. Mm-hmm. But then all it takes is like one bad onboarding experience, kind of like what you referenced. And it's like, now all of a sudden you've got one person, 10 people, whatever, kind of just introduced in the same way you were. I think your one-on-one example is maybe a way to weave those back in. Do you have some other suggestions on how to keep the standards maintained and woven into where they're not just sitting on the shelf, but they're getting used?
Yeah, for sure. With education, with teaching, right? They tell you that your students are probably going to only retain about 20 to 25% of what you deliver. And that 20 or 25% will only be retained if it's reviewed within 24 hours and then at some frequency following that, right? And so you can expect that any conversation you have with anyone, the retention is probably going to end up around 15% of all the information that you tried to share without some kind of set scheduled review process in place to make sure that stays up there. So if you had an employee who's just an amazing employee, knew 100% of how you did what you did and why you did what you did, probably because they've been there a long time and they helped develop it, right? And you bring an employee in who you ask to work with them, and it's all just communication. It's just them talking is how the training is delivered. So now you took 100% of what this person knew, which was 100% of your process, and they delivered it to the new employee who came in, and now they retain 20% of it. So that other percentage of your way of doing things is now lost. And then you bring in another employee and ask this person to be trained, right?
Now you get 4% of the original knowledge retained.
The original process. Yeah. Exactly right. And then you ask this guy or person, I guess, who's been now the third trainee down the list to go document your processes for you. Right? So then you end up with a 4% of what you actually do as a business. So one of the things I sit down when I work with my clients is I say, okay, we need to rediscover what 100% looks like, what 100% of your process is. And then we need to decide what part of that we actually want to capture. The workforce used to be more stable. You had people who came into a business and they stayed there till they retired. Now you've got 3 to 5 years, if that, of people staying there. So if you're training people and they're moving on and there is not a process to make that standard, to capture that knowledge, then that's just going out the door. And a lot of the manufacturing companies I've been in are really struggling because the why they do their thing, whatever it is, has been lost. You've got a few people who can push the right buttons in the right sequence, but nobody really understands why it needs to happen that way.
Drill
Troubleshooting
down
becomes
on that. Drill down on that a little bit more. What do you mean by the why has been lost?
so. Let's say food manufacturing. Say I was making French fries. There are certain temperatures and times that need to happen to a potato for it to be ready to become a French fry. Now, I, as an operator, can walk up and I can see a note that says your temperature should be 165 degrees. And I can push a button to get it to 165 degrees, right? And I can walk away. But what I don't understand is that at 160 degrees, the enzymes inside of a potato that turn it brown when you cut it on your counter are deactivated and they won't brown. They won't turn gray on you anymore. And so that temperature means something. They are also on top that a potato cell starts to swell at 140 degrees, starts to bring water in, and it continues to swell until you get to 180 degrees and then it bursts. So that temperature has no meaning to them other than I was asked to push this button and set this temperature, that they don't get the deeper knowledge of why. Why do I need to have it? Why does this range matter? If I go too hot, too cold, too short, too long, what is the effect? How do I look at the inequality and, understand that those attributes tie back to all these things I've done previously? And without some sort of standard, without some kind of capture, that gets lost as people move through the job. And you end up with people who can push the right buttons and put the right number in, but they really can't help you troubleshoot your process.
How do you retain that why? I'm assuming that it probably requires, some people are going to say, I don't want to know what I don't need to know.
Right.
And some people are just going to be innately curious. I mean, I'm assuming that you and I are probably really curious, and that's probably why we're in this discipline, because we find stuff like the temperature of a potato when it cooks somewhat interesting. Like, I could probably picture myself watching a documentary on the subject or something. How do you set up an environment where that curiosity can thrive, or where you can keep that why connected to the work?
What I like to do is just work with the individuals and have them help me break down the process. So we'll say, okay, process step number 1. What are all the things that go into this process? What are all the things that you have to have available to you to do the job right? And it can be data, it can be information, it can be raw materials, it can be people, whatever it is. And I say, what are the variables? What are the things that you have to make a decision on? You get to adjust. Now, what are they? And then finally, what's the outcome? What are the things that are going to come out of this process that you're expected to either pass along or somebody else is going to come pick up and take over after you're done? Well, the quality attributes of it, right? What does the good look like when this is finished? And then the final question I ask, okay, what is the desired outcome and why does that desired outcome matter? And the desired outcome is more of an alignment between the owners, the managers, on what their expectations are, or the customers, and how that applies to the way you do the work that you're doing. And walking through it and trying to break it down into those pieces, the first time it's clunky. People look at it, I just don't get it. Then the more they think about it, they're like, oh man, there are all these variables that come into my process that I really don't know. And it opens the door for us to start to discuss and document the things that they haven't thought about before. And it's a little time consuming, but by the end, and they understand the process because they've had to think through all these different things, that gets changed, and they have the opportunity to change the decisions they get to make. And that's where the meat of success comes in any process, is being able to manage those variables, understand what they are, and know why they're giving you the outcomes that you get. And so you're right. Some people just want to be button pushers. They don't necessarily want to dive into that kind of knowledge. But then the curious ones do, and they hunger for that. And the more they learn, the more they want to make sure that they can pass that knowledge along. And it plays really well into back to the one-on-one, right? As they're going through these steps, they're going to work with the manager, say, hey, I learned this about my process the other day. Let's make sure this is captured and part of what we do.
So let me take this next question in a direction. I'll ask you from a couple of different personas here. When we talk manufacturing, the folks that could be listening to this or exposed to this, it could be somebody who just needed a job and they just took something and they ended up working on some machine line. And then one day this guy, Matt, comes in as a consultant and starts talking to people, and then, maybe there's a time when you saw something in somebody, like maybe earlier in their career where they hadn't been exposed to this, maybe they hadn't had like a great system that they'd been in before, but there's
Mhm.
something that you kind of saw in them. I don't know if there's somebody, you don't need to share names or anything, but like an example or a scenario where you saw something and you saw like the light kind of turn on with somebody where they all of a sudden leaned in, where maybe they were either disengaged or not fully engaged, but they
Mhm.
like got interested. Is there an example like that that you can recall for us?
Yeah, definitely. I had a supervisor who was struggling with one of his employees. And the reason they were struggling is this employee was curious enough that they wanted to change and move and really test the limits of their process, right? They didn't want to be stuck in the framework that had been given them. And plenty of others that were very comfortable being there. They were quite all right with just staying in their little box and not coming out of it. And I kept hearing about this individual, like, and they keep changing everything. They keep wanting to push all the buttons. That drives me nuts. And so I called him in. I talked to him. I said, we need to follow the standard, but I need to understand why you think these things are better. And this person was curious enough that they not only just wanted to push buttons, but they had set up their own kind of experiments, right? To know, when I do this, this is going to be the result. On shift, doing their job, they needed to stay in the standard, but we also needed to have a venue for them to be able to test and use that curiosity to go out and improve things. And so in this specific case, you said, well, write me up a test plan. You think these things will do better. I can't have you just going out and randomly pushing things, but come back with the things that you want to test in your process. And let's create a test plan for this. Let's create a time for it so that you can get your needs met. We can see if it actually does improve, and then you can come back and we'll discuss it. We'll build this out. We'll okay it with your supervisor. We'll make sure the things are going the way they need to, and we'll go test one of these at a time. So you're not touching everything every day. And one, it appeased immediately their desire to be involved and understand and improve. And it gave their leadership also the tools to be able to deal with it when they need to deal with it and not be caught on a just having that structure to it and the schedule set them up for success. They were able to go in and challenge it. They were able to go in and test things. And they were excited to come back with the results, right? They would have been one of those A players that just wanted to thrive in the company and wanted to improve things. And just setting those simple little things, a schedule and the expectation, allowed them to go nuts.
As you were saying that, I was kind of picturing this like a troublemaker, like
Mhm.
other people in the places. This gal's a troublemaker. They're doing things they shouldn't do and causing some ripples. But I think like you saw in that, maybe it's some of that curiosity, and you put some structure around it, and you showed them how they could use what I might call like a structured experiment or a structured problem
Mhm.
solving approach to get at that. I think that's a lot of what I find really interesting about the work that I do, and particularly about this podcast, is so many of the people that I talk to, I don't want to describe them as troublemakers, but they were people that were curious. They were pushing buttons, like, what does this do? What happens when I do that? And sometimes those folks, in the right environment, they get promoted, they get given more reins, and then they get to this moment where they realize, hey, there's this like structured approach, this stuff that I'm doing. There's like a methodology, like people have done this before. I remember from some notes from a prior conversation, you had, I think it was a Deming quote or kind of a Deming principle that you were fond of. I'm curious if you could, was it a quote that you had from Deming?
Yeah. That's a quote I use quite a bit, was that a bad system will beat a good person any day. And so a lack of a system, a lack of a way for a person to succeed, the person's going to fail. They can't help but fail. Now, I'll give you an example, I guess. Let's say two employees are hired at exactly the same level to do exactly the same job. And one of them's a go-getter and the other one's just content to be there. And I, as a leader, I'm just going to pour more on this person, right? So now their expectations are here and their expectations are here. And they keep going up. Same job, same title, same pay. But now this person has taken on so much that they're starting to become overwhelmed. And I've been willing as a leader to pour onto them because they're just eager. Expectations never changed, pay never changed, title never changed. But what they were willing to take on and I was willing to pour on them is now here. And eventually this person reaches a max, right? They reach either an assignment that overwhelms them, or they are just overburdened to the point that they can't perform anymore, and they slip. And this is the person that the company's like, yeah, we got to get rid of them, right? We gave them this task, they slipped, they're gone. But the expectation never changed for that job. And this person down here is just kind of churning away. And so I believe that in my mind, I guess that's an example of that kind of thing where I watch over and over again these leaders, these managers pour things onto their best performers, their best technicians, whatever it may be, until they just get them to the point that they break, and then all of a sudden they're moved out of the organization, or they get so stressed they can't handle it anymore. But without a system to kind of help facilitate that, and a structure around, okay, I'm going to add more to you. Are you able, willing, capable to do this? And making sure that it's defined well enough that they can succeed. And then also set that as the new expectation, right? To where as this person takes on more, the expectation changes, but also the reward changes and the conversation changes. Instead of just saying, hey, they're really good at computer, I'm going to make them my IT guy. They're really good at sales, I'm just going to have them become my sales manager, whatever it might be. The overburden thing becomes very critical, because a lot of times we end up with moving out some of the best employees, seeing them get burnt out and get fired just because the expectation we put on them was higher than what they could handle, or we'd put way too much on. If we'd have structured it, if we'd have built systems around it and allowed them to kind of help define what they could handle, what they were comfortable taking on, then probably still have them as an employee and they'd be a great asset.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic there. As you said that, I'm kind of picturing like, when you drive a car and it has the RPM gauge, and it's got its whatever black or green, and then, orange and red, and it's like you red light that engine and you expect it to blow up, and kind of picturing that with people. You run somebody into the red line. Another thing that I've seen with project management software, to throw in a KPI Fire example specifically, is you have that person who's always good at getting things done, and then all of a sudden they start missing deadlines, and they start dropping the ball. And then you go and you open up the tool or the software, and you're like, man, this person has 27 projects assigned to them. And you're like, well, no wonder. Like we've overloaded this resource. It's like, if you've got 60 hours of work to do in a week, and you've got 40 hours every week you're going to, leave, maybe the same or a different chunk of it. So it's like this capacity idea with individuals. And that's probably where having some standards and operating within capacity is good advice. I know we think about that a lot with machines, certainly, but I think you're helping us remember to do that with our people. Are you struggling to ignite real change in your continuous improvement program? Firestarter is your field guide. Real stories, proven strategies, no fluff. Get it now on Amazon.
One of the things that I like to look at is, I talked about the variables inside of any process. The variables are what we need to have control of. And so I'll ask, I say, can you say that this process is managed? That means the definition is there. Who owns it? Who is the person who's in charge of this? Who's accountable and responsible for this process? And then who do they report to? And what does that reporting look like? And is it measured? How do we know what good looks like? It could be a physical number, right? But it can also be just a go, no go, or a picture of this is what right is. So is it managed? Is it measured? Is there a measurement so you know you've succeeded today? So a lot of times when I'm first meeting people, my question I ask is, how do you know you've done a good job at the end of the day? And most of the time I don't know. I don't know how I did a good job. I don't know if I did. I just try to get my stuff done, because what good looks like has never been defined. It's never been measured, right? There's no measurement to say that I'm doing a good job. So is it managed? Is it measured? Next one is a visual. Can I walk in pretty quickly and understand if we're on track, off track, if we are actually achieving good, right? If things are the way that they're supposed to be. And then the final one is it understood? And that's both of a conversation. So do you understand how this process works, or what it is that you're doing, why you're doing it, but also is there a standard to back that up? So I found if most processes, one, have the management defined or the ownership defined, there's a measurement to say what good looks like. It's visual. People can walk in pretty quickly without having to chase somebody down or find out a month later that something's wrong. It's visual. They can understand pretty quickly, and has this person given the opportunity to understand what it is they're supposed to do, then people succeed. They do really well. But you start to remove any of those variables and it becomes ambiguous, and people are left to make their own decisions as to how the process ought to work or what they ought to do, and they make mistakes. So if those aren't answered, then I'm setting the people up to fail. I put them in a position where there's amazing people in all of these manufacturing facilities who have never been really given any structure, and they succeed every day. They go figure it out, and they're awesome. It's so cool to watch them. Is it right or not? Who knows? But they're making it work. And if you unplug them after they figured it out, things start to fall apart, right? But if you can go in there and say, okay, is this managed? Do we know who owns it? Do we know who you report to? Is it measured? Do we know what good looks like? Is it visual? Can I see pretty quickly if I'm on track or off track? And do I have the knowledge and the information available to me to help me understand why I'm doing what I'm doing? Then set those employees up to succeed in whatever process you put them into. And it can be as rigid as you want, or it can be a little looser, but they still have that framework to help them succeed in doing what they're doing and understanding what the expectations are.
This topic of what good looks like and defining winning or success for a given day is super interesting one for me. I love this topic. I know some jobs are easier to define that for than others. I'm assuming that you've had some challenges in defining what good looks like in different places in the org. Did you give us an example of like the kind of jobs where defining winning or success is really pretty straightforward, and then maybe somewhere it's a little bit more difficult, or you had to do something a little more creative to define what winning looks like?
Yeah. So an easy one would be something coming off of a CNC lathe. Right. The program spits the piece out. You have calipers or micrometers or a go, no go gauge, right? That gives you the dimensions. You've got a drawing right there that tells you exactly what each dimension's supposed to be. You measure all those dimensions. You're within tolerance. It's pretty easy to know if you've done a good job that day, right? That thing was made according to the drawing, and the drawing's very visible, and the tools are right at hand to measure it. So it's pretty simple that way. More difficult ones are, speaking to people. Those jobs where your output, your success is the way that you address other individuals, the conversations you have, the kind of things you say, the kind of information you gather, or data entry, right? Going through and just moving information from this spreadsheet to that sheet. It's a little tougher to say what good looks like. The funny thing though, is if you start to really ask people to define it, to say, okay, if you were to hire somebody to take your job, if I said, tomorrow I've got to find a new person to work here because I'm going to promote you. If you went out and you found this new person, how would you tell them to do what you're doing? How would you make sure the thing that you're doing, it's done exactly the same way that you're doing it? You're doing a great job. We want to promote you. So how would you define it? And kind of push it back on them and ask them to go write down or document or paint a picture of what winning looks like to them, what drives them, what makes them feel like they've succeeded. And when you ask them to start doing that and kind of guide them through it a little bit and have those conversations, they do a really pretty good job of defining what good looks like in those kind of roles. Well, I know when a customer calls, I need to make sure that I introduce myself. I need to make sure I ask their name. I need to get these pieces of information. I need to keep an upbeat voice, right? I need to do these different things that they do and they've learned. And then that really sets the parameters around that. Okay, now the next person, once we have that captured, can step into this and we can start molding their behavior to match what you found successful.
I made a little note on one of your comments earlier. You started to talk about the idea of an issue log, I think, like capturing issues. For somebody that doesn't maybe have like the discipline of doing that regularly, explain what an issue log is and how they might use one and what kind of things they might do with it.
Yeah. The thing I was referring to, we called it an issue investigation, but it was something has fallen apart, right? Something happened. We had a quality issue. We had a downtime issue. We had misbehavior of some sort, something that was outside of what we would consider the standard, right? Rather than just reacting to it, we build a simple little form. You said, okay, I want you to go out and I want you to talk to everybody who's involved, document and talk to everybody who's involved in this issue. Then write down what happened, capture it from every person who was involved, not just one, but everybody who was involved. Let's capture their perception of what happened. And then let's document what the outcome was. What were the results of this, right? What were all the effects? And then if we needed to get into some root cause, some 5 whys, something like that, we definitely could. But then we'd move down to the next section where we'd say, okay, did you have everything you needed to succeed? Did you have all the tools you needed? Did you have the resources you needed, like we talked about before? Do you have the knowledge of how to do this properly? And do you have a standard that backs up that knowledge? And if any of those were no, like I'd mentioned, then as a leader, I had to go start making actions against the no's. I had to go understand what tools they actually needed. I had to go understand what knowledge they were lacking or what standard was missing that made it to where they couldn't help but fail, or they were more likely to fail. And then those actions coming out of that, right, made up the action board to where we would post it somewhere that everybody could see. And I would say, okay, these are the things as leadership we need to do to help you succeed. And these are the actions that we're going to take to do it. And this is when it's going to be done. That way, that individual who'd been involved, those individuals who'd been involved in that incident, right, could come up pretty easily and understand what we were trying to fix for them and when it was going to happen. But it's easy as sticky notes if you want it to be that simple, but just moving down the wall into the different categories of started through completion. But at least they could see it. They understood that it wasn't out to discipline anybody, right? That wasn't my hope. It's not to try to catch you. It's try to understand how I can help you best succeed in what you're doing and set that up in a visual way to where they could follow and see that that was really the purpose in all this, was to help them succeed in their role.
Matt, I'd like to ask you a few questions. These are what I call the rapid fire section. So these are just kind of some short answers. So, number one, the most important job of a leader is to
Support their people and develop their people.
I know that the lean and continuous improvement is not all about the tools necessarily, but is there a favorite go-to problem-solving tool or visual device that you find yourself turning to? It's kind of in your quick poll position.
Yeah. A3 thinking is the one I've gone into, and a little longer answer, I guess. I had
Yeah.
a consultant who was a lean consultant, continuous improvement consultant, and he says, we're going to teach you A3 thinking. And I did everything I could to break it, everything I could to disprove it and find better ways. I mean, I tore it all to pieces, and he kept coming to me. He says, how long are you going to keep doing this? I said, oh, there's got to be better ways. Right? This thing's so clunky. It just seems like so much. It takes too much time, whatever excuse I made. And I tried, and he'd come back again. You figured it out yet? No, there's got to be a better way to do this. And I was finally converted. It took a few weeks of me beating my head against the wall to realize that each one of those steps is so critical in A3 thinking, and they play such a role in trying to come up with the real root cause and sustainable solutions that now that's the thing I go to. If I step in, I'm going to work on trying to bring people around to A3 thinking.
For anybody that might not be super familiar with A3 thinking or has heard it, but not, exactly sure what the steps are, could you explain what A3 thinking is? Or
Yeah, so A3 thinking is using the typical, lean manufacturing A3 form that Toyota developed. One, it's defining the problem in a way that you have enough time and resources to solve it. So let's say you had high turnover at your facility. If you walked into a person in HR and says, hey, we need to solve turnover. That's your rock for this year, is you're solving turnover. I mean, it's huge. It's daunting, right? To go say, I'm going to solve all turnover. And a person can't really accomplish that. So they get frustrated, they get scared, they don't do it. But if I came in and said, okay, I'm asking one person to do this in a month. So now I've set the time and I've set the resources. Let's break the problem into something that I think you can probably handle by yourself in a month. So instead of all turnover, now I'd say, okay, let's find the position within the facility that has the highest turnover. And then let's find the reason that the people in that area say they're leaving. What is the one thing that they say frustrates them so much they can't handle this job anymore? Let's solve that. With the time and resources we have, we can look at that one area, we can look at that one issue that's causing turnover, and we can try to solve that one thing. I solved all turnover? No, but I've improved the biggest hitter. Right. But within the time and the resources I allotted, if that makes any sense. So that's the first box. The second one is current state. Where are we at today? What do we look like right now? And I've seen this done a couple different ways. It's kind of fun. I've seen people draw pictures, put a big piece of paper on the wall and you go up and have people draw pictures of what they think things are like today, or bullet points and just write phrases and sentences that represent where we are today. What's today look like for this company? The next one is the future state. What do we want it to look like? Sky's the limit. We can have this look like anything. What do we really want it to look like? And ask them to do the same thing. Draw a picture of what the future looks like, bullet points of what the future looks like. So now we've got the problem defined, we've got the future state, we've got what we want it to look like, and now we move into what's the gap. Somewhere in between that, right, is if it's an issue that's currently causing us a lot of pain, then we go find a way to Band-Aid the issue, solve it, or put something into place that keeps it from hurting the business or hurting a person. But we know it's not the root cause. It's just something to stop the bleeding for a minute. And then let's dig into what the gaps are. What is it that's keeping us from going from where we're at today to where we want to be? That's the gap. We're here, we want to be here. What's in the middle of it? And then you dig in, at that point, you dig into some of the root cause tools like 5 whys and the fishbone diagram and all kinds of other things that really help us understand the root cause. Then after that's defined, then we start running into the solution side of the A3 thinking. Some great advice that I got is for every root cause you find, you should also find 5 solutions. The first solution gets the loudest person in the room, or the grumpiest person in the room, or the most powerful person in the room's idea out, right? The first solution. Second solution gets the next level. And then when you start working down into the 5th solution, now everybody has had a chance to talk, and you're really starting to test people's brains and really get them into some deep thinking about and creative thinking about how things ought to go. You stick with the first solution, usually the most powerful, the most grumpy, the most vocal person is all you ever hear. You start moving into deeper levels, and then everybody in the group really starts to get a chance to share what their opinions are and really think through it. So identify the gaps through the root cause, and then move into the solution phase. Select which solution you're going to go with of those 5, and then go out and develop your test. Say how we're going to prove that this is right. Do the testing part of it. Make sure that it does actually solve the root cause, and then build that into your standard as the new way we do business, in a nutshell.
I think that's a key part. Build that into the standard after you make that improvement.
For sure.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for running us through that. Okay, another finish this sentence. Continuous improvement is
Involving people and solving the problems.
Do you have a favorite question, one that you find yourself turning to most frequently?
Yeah, my favorite question is if you had no boundaries, if you speaking to an employer, to a manager, right? If you had no boundaries and you could come in and say, this is the perfect way to get this done. The kind of stuff we talk about around the water cooler, right? Or when we get home to our spouse, the things we complain about, man, if they would only do it this way, everything would be fine. So I like to ask them that question. When you're home complaining to the person that you're closest to, or you're standing next to a coworker and you're solving the world's problems, when we're dealing with this issue, what is it that you guys talk about? What do you think would be the thing that would solve the world's problems around this issue? And just kind of gets the juices flowing. And if there's enough of a relationship, right, then they do start to share. And you find some amazing insight into those conversations that most people will have kind of to the sideline. They won't necessarily bring into the conference rooms, into the meetings, for fear of what might come up.
That's a good one. What is the best advice you've ever received?
Put all your cards out there. Let everybody see what's going on. Thinking that you're hiding things to protect the business or hiding things to protect individuals just builds distrust. The leader that I had that exemplified that the most, he would come into the facility and he'd set up a bunch of folding tables around the room. And he would lay out all the quality issues they had. He would lay out all the financials. He'd lay out all the maintenance things. He'd lay out all the HR problems they had. He'd leave people's names off, right? It wasn't telling on anybody. But then everybody could walk around and, as part of this meeting, just go from table to table and look at everything that was there. There was no secrets. And what would happen is, as people started working around the tables and looking at them, one guy's like, hey, I had this same problem and this is what we did. Or, yeah, I've experienced this too. And I mean, just this conversation started flowing, and you started finding solutions, right? Finding opportunities to improve just by standing at the table and talking to people as they came through.
Yeah, that's such an interesting phenomenon, is how humans love to solve problems, right?
We're creators. We love to create.
Or create problems sometimes too.
Yeah,
But
fair enough.
a lot of times try to fix them. Is there something about, like, the way people think about lean or talk about lean, that or things that you'll hear in a business that are like triggers for you? Like, it really annoys me when I hear this, or something along those lines.
Probably for me, it's when people say they want to implement lean or they want to be part of continuous improvement, but as soon as a problem is brought to them, they jump up and they just knee-jerk react to that issue, right? They don't follow any kind of root cause. They don't follow any kind of anything. And they're saying, no, we're being lean because we're proactive. No, your proactivity is firefighting, and you don't know if you're firefighting the right thing. Right? And people are rewarded on their ability or their willingness to jump on and look active. Yeah, I had one company I worked with. They measured their success in a day by how many steps they got in. And walking in and saying, "Oh, the reason you're getting so many steps in is because you've placed different steps in your process at different names of the facilities, and people have to run it back and forth. But you're rewarding them based on the number of steps they've got, right? Instead of saying, let's really understand why our process is so scattered. What are we rewarding? They were getting a pat on the back, right? But we're lean. No, you're not lean. You're just busy. You're busy. You're proactive. You're reactive, but not really solving problems or becoming better at your process.
That's a good one. There's a lot of good examples where the wrong metric was used for the right reason, or something like that, where there's a metric that's used for some reason, but then this turns out to be focused on the wrong thing, I guess you could say.
Yeah. I've had quite a few owners of companies that have come to me and said, we're okay if you come work on our process. We're okay if you come improve things, but my people have to stay busy. Well,
Stay busy.
so I'll pull back and say, okay, you're going to have to define for me then what you think busy is. So I don't want anybody standing around. I don't want anybody being in one place. I want them actively doing the thing. Like, so if there's a pile of 40 of them over here, you want them to keep putting stuff into that pile just so you can feel comfortable that they're busy. Well, yeah, I'm paying them. They got to be busy. And that's probably one of the bigger hurdles I deal with is the idea that busy isn't productive. And in order to go into lean and really move into that, you're taking away the non-value added time. And so there's going to be times where they don't look so busy, but your process is flowing much better than it ever has.
My last question is just, is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't ask you yet?
That's a good question. I think there is. The question that comes up for me a lot is, as an owner in a business, as somebody who's now having to let go of the reins and can no longer just hold on to everything, or as a manager, right? They can't hold on to everything anymore. And they're starting to see that slip away, their ability to just keep it all in their head or control it all just through grit. How do we take a person like that who's in that situation and move them into a structured position where things flow to them, reports are done, people are developed and given responsibilities and accountabilities, to where this person can start to let go and really trust other people to do what they're asked. My philosophy is that we as humans, we freely give trust. I have not stopped and interviewed any airplane pilots when I got on an airplane, but I took off with them, let them take me a long ways in the air. I've never interviewed a Uber driver, a taxi driver, a chef at a restaurant, right? I freely gave my trust to those people. And when we're interviewing somebody, we do the same thing. We bring them in an organization. We automatically trust them because we saw things in them that we liked. But then over time that, the shine starts to wear off, because then we start to see the good and the bad. But I freely give that trust. But if you talk to a leader in an organization who has hired somebody to do a job, they'll always say, oh, they've got to earn my trust. And the reason they say that, again, my opinion, but is because they haven't learned how to either ask the right questions, get the right information through their reporting, through their one-on-ones, whatever structure they have built, to know that the things that they care most about are being taken care of. And they haven't taken the time to really capture the standard of what to them good looks like. It's still stuck in their head. And so they burn through employees as they're trying to find this person who somehow magically gets the vision that they've got in their mind, even though it's never really been shared with them. Or the person who just happens to communicate in exactly the right way, because that process has never been built out as far as the expectation for communication and reporting and so on and so forth.
It's such a good reminder, and really the responsibility of a manager, of a leader, to set people up for success. Yeah, it is a great responsibility, and it's challenging work. So it's encouraging that there's some good wisdom out there. I appreciate you sharing those thoughts with us and those frameworks, and just a good reminder of those concepts again. So the website one more time.
It's opex-advisors.com.
Okay. And Matt, you're also on LinkedIn, I believe.
Absolutely.
Matt Yearsley. And for our listeners, if you would like to suggest a guest, ask a question, or give any ideas for episodes or content, you can reach out to me, Keith Norris, on LinkedIn. And this concludes this episode of KPI Fireside, a continuous improvement podcast. If you have enjoyed the episode today, please be sure to add a comment. You can follow, like, subscribe on all the socials, and please share the podcast with friends or colleagues who are as passionate about continuous improvement as you are. You can find us wherever you get your podcast. And until next time, keep driving progress and sparking change. This episode is brought to you by KPI Fire, the all-in-one platform for continuous improvement. With KPI Fire, you can align strategy, drive execution, and engage your people. So whether you're leading a team or driving enterprise-wide change, KPI Fire helps you deliver real results. Learn more at www.kpifire.com.